leads me to introducing our next speaker. And our next speaker is Glen Kitteringham. Dr. Kitteringham has decades of experience as a security professional, investigator, manager, and trainer. Notably, he has authored industry-defining documents that are used nationally and internationally. Most recently, he runs Kitteringham Security Group, which provides security and business management related services. Glen's presentation is entitled Practical Applications of Competency Models for Security Practitioners. And this presentation introduces the security practitioner to the 4 security industry models with a particular focus on security officer and patrol services and security supervisor models. I'll leave it to Glen. Take it over.
Thank you very much. I am looking to share my screen. There. Everybody see that? Practical applications?
Yep, you're good.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to this conference. I appreciate you all being here. So I'm going to get right into this. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with competency models. It's been interesting. I've given a variety of presentations over the years to different groups, and whenever I ask from a show of hands how many people are like, I'll give you an example with ASIS International, how many ASIS members are familiar with the ASIS security or enterprise security competency model, 1 or 2 people may put up their hands. And so, I mean, even ASIS, one of the largest security organizations in the world, after spending 10 years developing competency model, they haven't done anything with it, which I find kind of odd. So anyway, having said that, just before I introduce you to a couple of the competency models that I've worked on, I first of all just want a brief introduction of what a competency and what a competency model is. And as you can see from the definition there in front of you, it's just it's knowledge, skills, and abilities that allows you to do your job well. And so the competency model I'm going to show you 2 competency models are for the security officer and security supervisors. And I'll go through them in a few minutes. And then competency model itself is a collection of competencies that together define successful performance in a particular job setting. And I think Roy will make this presentation available to people who want to have a copy of it. So I'm perfectly comfortable with that. Roy would just ask you that if you do, you just PDF it first. But the issue around competency models, I think, is the previous presenters over the last couple of hours have actually talked about it or kind of skirted around that idea. It's interesting. I've been involved. It's been 35 years now, 36. This is my 36th year working in the industry. And a lot of the stuff that I've heard people talking about here today is stuff that I heard people talking about 30 years ago. And it seems like on some levels that we haven't progressed at all. We're still worried about or still concerned about salaries. We're still concerned about turnover or low salaries. We're still concerned about turnover, retention. We're still concerned about, work. I'm finally glad to see that workplace violence, psychological trauma, and workplace violence start to hit people's radars. And anyway, it seems like, as I said, sometimes we haven't evolved at all. But on other levels, the interesting thing is that there are a tremendous amount of documents out there that have been put together. There's a huge body of work, body of knowledge that's been put out there, a lot of research articles, a lot of practical applicable documents, but it just seems like nobody knows about them. So I think what's probably missing is some sort of repository more than anything. And so, from my perspective, I've broken competency model down into basically hard skills and soft skills. And the hard skills are the tasks that security officers and supervisors engage in on a regular basis. But the soft skills are what, in my opinion, what allows the people to do the hard skills successfully. And it's just that simple. So in front of you, you see 4 competency models. So in the top left-hand corner, you see the enterprise security model. The first one next to it on the right-hand side is the instructor competency model. And then you got your security supervisor competency model. And in the far right-hand corner, the security officers and patrol services competency model. So just to give you a little bit of background, ASIS started working on the enterprise security competency model probably back in about 2010 or 2011. And when they first brought up the idea, and they had a number of tabletops at some conferences that I attended. And then over the years, they developed the model, as the one that you can see in front of you. And what I can do, for anybody who's interested, when this is all over, I will upload all. I think if I have all 4 competency models, I'm at a client work site right now, but I can upload some of the competency models into the chat box on the right-hand side, so you can have access to them. So anyway, once ASIS developed the competency model, they reached out to the United States Department of Labor. And through a verification process that lasted a couple of years, they finally got approval. And so the enterprise security competency model has been posted. And I'll provide the websites for these. And then, so you can actually see the website at the bottom right-hand corner. But anyway, based on the ASIS enterprise security competency model, that's what gave me the idea to develop the security officers of patrol services competency model. And there's several years of research that have gone into that competency model. First of all, when I did my doctoral thesis, I looked at whether the Alberta Basic Security Training Program prepares workers to work in the security industry. And surprise, surprise, it doesn't. From my opinion, and so I completed my doctoral thesis in 2017, and so in the last 10 years, my mind hasn't changed all that much. But the ABST, as it's known here, only thing it does when a security officer completes it is it allows the security officer to work legally in the province of Alberta, but it does not allow you. It doesn't prepare you to work in the industry. 40 hours is nowhere near enough. Not even close. And so part of what I did with my thesis was I looked at 35 training programs from all over the world, and I compared the ABST with these other 34 programs. And part of what came out of that was the creation of a standard set of tasks that security officers engage in. And then using that and how I arrived at that was I looked at what the academic community has been saying about security tasks since at least 1970. I looked at what governments say what security officers do, or guards, depending on whether you prefer the word term guard or officer, because a lot of governments around the world have books, national classifications of all occupations in that country, and so they categorize every occupation. And so what it is for human resource specialists and private sector and the colleges and universities. It allows them to look at that document, and they can actually prepare education and training programs after looking at those national classification schemes. So most countries around the world have them. And so as I said, I looked at what the academic community said that the guards are doing. I looked at what the government said the guards were doing. And then finally, I looked at what the private sector said the guards were doing. And so I put all that together, and I came up with a standard list of tasks. And then using that, I went to IFPO, International Foundation for Protection Officers, and convinced them to do a global evaluation on security officer tasks. And so they did. And so we hired a consulting company out of the UK, and we did a 9-country survey. And originally the survey responses went out to over 300,000 guards around the world in 9 countries, of which we got 12,000 basically usable responses back. And then we asked them a whole bunch of questions, and then that research is also available. And then using that, we reached out to the United States Department of Labor and worked for another year. And then we created this security officers of patrol services competency model. So that's what you see in front of you. And then I took it one step further, and I worked with IFPO, and we created the security supervisor model and also the security instructor model. Because one of the things we're finding within the security industry is that there's no standards for instructors whatsoever. So, and these documents are all very similar in length. They're all between 29 and 34 pages long, and they are very, very handy. And again, I'll make them available for anybody who's interested. So one of the things you'll see is the shared competencies in all 4 roles is tiers 1, 2, and 3. And so, as I said previously, these are tier 1 is the personal effectiveness competencies. Tier 2 is the academic competencies, and tier 3 are the workplace competencies. And so I consider them foundational. And again, these are a combination of hard and soft skills that people need to be good at in order to do tier 4 tasks. And so, as you can see in the patrol services competency model, security guards engage in 6 tasks, and that's pretty much regardless of what site they're at. It doesn't matter if they're at a nuclear power plant, or if they're at a construction site guarding a hole, or if they're at a shopping mall, at a high-rise property, or wherever. There's multiple sectors within the industry, but basically guards engage in 6 tasks. It's access control, it's basic investigations, it's rule enforcement, it's patrols and surveillance, it's alarms and emergency response, and it's customer service and public relations. And so now, depending on where you are, the percentages of time that you spend on each task may be different. If you're working at a nuclear power plant, access control may, and I've never worked at a nuclear power plant, so I'm just making a stab in the dark here, but maybe 95% of what a basic guard does at a nuclear power plant is access control, or maybe 50%, and maybe the other 45% are patrols and surveillance. Don't know if there's a lot of need for customer service, public relations. However, I will say that we're all each other's customers. So anyway, just wanted to show you that these 6 tasks. So I'll give you an example of where the benefit of the competency model can come into play. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you actually see the part of the table of contents. And so it's, as you can see, it's broken up. There's an alignment between the model on the previous slide, and then there's the tier 1. And what does that look like? Well, it's actually comprised of 7 parts, right? Personal effectiveness is interpersonal skills and teamwork, integrity, professionalism, et cetera, et cetera. You can see that. And then you go to, as I said, in tier 4, so industry-wide technical competencies. So I'll use the example of what I think is probably the most difficult task a security officer is going to engage in, which is rule enforcement. There's so many things in the security world that are really easy to say, but I've come to realize that are hard to do. And so you can see when you go to the competency model, when we look at rule enforcement, so it's enforce site rules, policies, procedures, post orders, regulations established by site management, et cetera, et cetera. So it's 4.31, enforcing site rules. So what does that actually mean? Well, it's to provide a physical or virtual presence of the site. It's to be able to understand, explain, and follow the rules of the site as established by the SOPs or other appropriate sources. To be able to identify the sources of site rules. Generally speaking, there's 3 sources of site rules. There's company rules, there's civil code rules, and there's criminal code rules. Part of enforcement is conducting a legal arrest, because obviously if you're enforcing rules and you come across an individual who doesn't want to follow the rules, at some point, the security officer has to make a decision. Well, how am I going to enforce them? Either by denying access, or if they're involved in criminal activity, is by potentially either placing that person under arrest or backing off. It really depends. It's situation dependent. But then you can see conducting a legal arrest, adhere to local legal requirements for trespassing, detention, arrest, search, and seizure. So people had mentioned previously, the judge had mentioned previously that people need to have an understanding of the legal parameters in which they operate within, right? Both civil and criminal. But a lot of security officers aren't taught that, even though, like in the Alberta-based security training program, I think it calls for 4 hours of legal training, which is not nearly enough. And that's a whole nother issue. The world seems to be obsessed with counting the number of hours of training for people in the security industry. And I get why they do that. It's easy to count the hours. The problem is that there's a difference between quality and quantity. Some European countries, I think Norway, Hungary, possibly Romania have 300 plus hours of training. And then you've got countries like the UK where it's 24 hours of training. In Spain, it's 160 hours of training. But it's the easiest thing in the world to do is to say, well, you should have a minimum number of training hours. But my question to the audience is, well, would you rather have 40 hours of really, really good training or 200 hours of really, really bad training? And then that that goes into the larger issue of is who's doing the training. What's the background of the instructors? And that's also why I took it upon myself to develop a draft instructor competency model. Like most people, the reality is that most people who work in the security industry, who train in the security industry, have no formal training in adult learning, which I find absolutely bizarre. I get it. A lot of people they kind of evolve into that industry, but if you're teaching adults is a whole different ball game than it is like doing something versus teaching something, and having exposure to adult learning and learning how to do a needs assessment, for example, or develop a lesson plan, or identify learning outcomes, testing for learning outcomes, stuff like that. That can often is only exposed through formal learning. So anyway, back to the rule enforcement, you can see 4.33. So de-escalating interactions and using appropriate levels of force. I would say 4.34, using weapons required for the position. Mainly not. Sorry about that. My phone went off. Mainly not a Canadian issue, but there are some security personnel, again, in the aforementioned nuclear power plants who are carrying weapons. And so you can use this competency model to develop both a job description and training. And so again, there's been a lot of work that's gone into this stuff, a tremendous amount of like years and years of work. So that's just the one example when it comes to rule enforcement. And so as I talked about this before, right, 6 main tasks: access control, basic investigations, rule enforcement. You can see the other ones. Now, interesting, customer service is both a separate standalone task, and yet it's the only one that I think is embedded in everything else you do. Because you can do access control, but you need to have good customer service and public relations skills, because if you're denying access to somebody, you want that person to walk away feeling, like not insulted, but if I'm not going to say they're happy, but at least they're not going to be angry that they've been denied access. And so that means you have to have good communication skills, and you have to have good customer service skills. So, or basic investigations. When you're going to investigate, conduct a basic investigation, and you're interviewing a witness or a victim, you got to be cognizant of what they may be going through. And, to elicit the information you need for the report, you have to have good customer service skills. So, as I said before, so these tier 4 competencies, so they can be, well, all of it, the tiers 1 through 4, they can be used to develop the job descriptions. You can do performance audits. Are they actually doing what they said they're doing? You can use it to establish training programs, and you can also use it to establish salaries or salary bands. So here's a prime example. It's the site that I'm working at right now. I'm working with a client, and so we took the tasks that the security guards were involved in on a regular basis, and our team leads have to submit a daily summary of their team. So our teams range anywhere from, let's say, 7 to 20 guards on at any given day, but because we don't want to overload our team leads, they have to just give us a daily summary of 2 guards. And we want them to give us we want them to give us an overview of, as you can see, access control, patrols and surveillance, investigations, customer service, alarms, emergency response. And so the rating they get is either below expectations, meets expectations, exceeds expectations, or not applicable. And there's just a few comments. And this task is actually designed to do 2 things. One is it's to create far greater awareness for the team leads, situational awareness for the team leads, to know what their guards are actually up to. but also look for examples of, if they're actually doing the job, we want to have an example or two of how they're doing the job at an acceptable level or below expectations. And so these performance reviews have been fantastic, actually, increasing the performance expectations around all the way around. The other thing I want to say is that I'm the co-editor for the 10th edition, along with Sandy Davies and Kevin Palacios, for the 10th edition of the Professional Protection Officer, and we just got it published a year ago. And so why we updated the entire 10th edition was we built it around the Security Officer and Patrol Services competency model. And so everything that's been embedded into the new 10th edition it's designed to support the new competency model. So just in case anybody's interested in this, and there's the website link if anybody's interested in the CPO program.
2 minutes.
Okay. And then the security supervisor competency model, as you can see. So the only difference is that depending obviously upon the tasks, supervisors engage in as many as 9 different tasks. And I'm not going to read them off for you. You can see them all. But it's scheduling staff, it's training security officers, it's developing monitoring reports, etc. So here's another example. So here is the table of contents. And this is one of the things. So actually the table of contents is on the right-hand side at the bottom half of the page. But I wanted to show you from scheduling. It's easy to say scheduling. Demonstrate ability to plan, understand, and apply scheduling rules for the department. But what does that actually mean? Well, there's actually 9 things that a scheduler has to do. They have to make accurate projections of staffing requirements. They have to ensure proper balancing of staffing. They need to be prepared for special circumstances, special events. They got to monitor overtime. They got to provide enough time off between shifts to meet legislative requirements. Post schedules in advance. They got to track vacation, sick, and other paid time off. They got to be able to potentially pilot new staffing tools, and they've got to involve employees. So when I first looked into it, I was absolutely shocked. And again, not all sites require all tasks. You know, I'm working at a large site right now where our supervisors do not do 8, and they actually the only one they don't do is 8. They do the other 8 tasks, 1 to 7 and 9. So. And then it's the same thing. We've created a performance review for our supervisors, and it's, again, below expectations, meets or aboves, but it's monitoring the security guard work levels, it's training them, it's liaising, it's developing and monitoring reports, responding to and managing emergencies, and monitoring supervisory systems. And it's the exact same process. So these documents are all available at these websites, but I will also upload them in the chat box on the right-hand side of the table. And that's it.